Have you ever wondered why life becomes harsher exactly at the moment you begin to see it more clearly? It is almost as if the world senses your awakening and immediately turns up the difficulty level. This is the first shock of understanding that life is not a gentle garden, but a hostile field where only those who develop awareness, perception, and inner strategy truly survive. And what makes this even more unsettling is that most people around you are moving through this battlefield as if it were harmless terrain. They do not see the traps, the psychological landmines, the emotional predators, or the subtle forces shaping their behavior. But you see them, or at least you are beginning to. The moment this clarity appears, something shifts inside you. You start noticing how people speak without meaning anything, how situations unfold according to patterns nobody else seems to recognize, how the environment pushes you to stay unconscious because consciousness disrupts the game. This is where the awakening truly begins, not with mystical visions, but with the simple and terrifying realization that the world is not designed to nurture your growth. It tests it, it confronts it, it resists it. And once you sense this tension, once you feel the hostility of the field, you cannot return to the old way of moving through life. You begin searching for strategy, for understanding, for a way to thrive rather than simply survive. You become more selective, more observant, more attuned to the hidden mechanics of human behavior. And this shift, subtle at first, soon becomes irreversible. Have you ever felt this happening inside you? You might already be sensing the early tremors of this transformation. What you discover next might surprise you. And before we go deeper, tell me in the comments if you have ever felt the world becoming sharper, heavier, almost too real the moment you started waking up. Your insight helps shape this journey, so leave a comment, check if you are subscribed, and give this video a like if the message resonates with you, because engagement is what keeps this conversation alive as we move further into the heart of this hostile field. As you continue moving through this hostile field, something else begins to happen. The veil that shielded you from the deeper mechanics of life starts thinning. You begin to recognize patterns that most people pass by without a second glance. The way conversations repeat themselves in predictable loops, the way people defend illusions they secretly know are fragile, the way society pushes everyone toward distraction rather than introspection. These patterns rise before you like shapes emerging from the fog, and for the first time, you start understanding that life operates on structures far older and far sharper than anything you were ever taught. You notice how every environment has an emotional climate, a frequency that subtly dictates behavior. Some spaces feel heavy, as if draining your awareness, while others sharpen your instincts in an instant. You start perceiving how certain people unconsciously pull you into their internal storms, how their unspoken fears spill into the room long before any words are said. These perceptions are not imagination. They are the early signs of a mind learning to navigate reality without the blindfold. This awareness can be disorienting at first. You find yourself questioning whether you are seeing too much or simply seeing what has always been there. The truth is that awakening does not add new layers to the world. It removes them. And what remains can be unsettling because it contradicts the polite fiction everyone else has agreed to uphold. You see the tension behind the smile, the insecurity behind the arrogance, the confusion behind the certainty. You see that most people are not living. They are performing roles assigned to them long before they were conscious enough to choose. Yet this new vision is not a burden. It is an initiation. It is the mind adapting to its environment, developing the subtle forms of intelligence required to thrive where others barely manage to cope. As these patterns reveal themselves more clearly, you begin to realize that perception itself is power, and the more deeply you read the field around you, the more capable you become of moving through it without being consumed by its hostility. As your perception sharpens, you begin to notice something even more subtle operating beneath the surface of your daily experience, the invisible mechanisms that drain your energy long before you realize what is happening. These forces rarely appear dramatic. In fact, they disguise themselves as ordinary routines, familiar conversations, or environments you have simply grown accustomed to. But the more awake you become, the more clearly you sense how certain interactions leave you feeling hollow, how certain habits blur your mental clarity, and how certain emotional dynamics quietly pull you away from your path without ever asking for permission. You start to see that exhaustion is not always physical. It often begins as a slow erosion of attention. Every unresolved tension, every unspoken expectation, every situation where you feel obligated to shrink your awareness creates a subtle leak in your inner world. Most people never detect this leak because they themselves are scattered, unfocused, or numb to their own internal state. But you are no longer numb. You feel the shift, the moment it begins. A conversation that once felt harmless now appears loaded with emotional hooks. A place you used to visit without thought now feels misaligned with your rhythm. Even your own mind reveals old mental loops designed to keep you distracted rather than conscious. These invisible mechanisms were always there, shaping your decisions and influencing your emotional state, but awakening exposes their structure. You realize how often people project their unresolved fears onto you, expecting you to carry emotional weight that is not yours. You notice how certain groups unconsciously enforce conformity, subtly discouraging anyone who dares to think differently. And you understand how easy it is to lose yourself in the noise of expectations if you do not learn to guard your inner energy with intention. This awareness is both clarifying and unsettling. Clarifying because it frees you from the false belief that your struggles were random or personal. Unsettling because it reveals how much of your life was shaped by forces operating beneath your awareness. But as these mechanisms become visible, something important awakens in you. The capacity to navigate them with precision, to reclaim your energy before it drains away, and to move through the world with a deeper sense of autonomy that quietly reshapes everything around you. As these invisible mechanisms become clearer, something unexpected begins to happen inside you. A growing need to step back from the noise, to remove yourself from the emotional currents that once swept you effortlessly along. What looks like isolation from the outside is, in truth, a strategic withdrawal. You are not hiding from the world. You are recalibrating your perception to understand it more accurately. When you stop matching the frequency of the environment, you start hearing the subtle tones beneath it, the unspoken tensions, the performative optimism, the quiet desperation masked as confidence. The field becomes easier to read when you are not entangled in it. This distance does not make you cold. It makes you precise. You begin choosing when to speak, when to observe, and when to remain completely still. The more conscious you become, the less you feel the urge to explain yourself, because you realize that most people are not seeking understanding, but validation of their own narratives. Your silence becomes a form of protection, not out of fear, but out of clarity. You sense the emotional traps before they form, the manipulation wrapped in kindness, the obligations disguised as loyalty. And with each step back, you recover a piece of yourself that the world had tried to claim. Yet this isolation is not meant to last forever. It is a necessary phase, a recalibration that sharpens your intuition and strengthens your boundaries. Distance allows you to see that much of the hostility you once felt from life did not come from the world itself, but from environments misaligned with who you were becoming. Stepping away reveals the truth with a clarity that crowded rooms and loud voices could never offer. And as your perception deepens, you begin to navigate the field not as a lost participant, but as a conscious observer learning to move with intention. If you have ever felt this pull towards strategic distance, this quiet need to step outside the noise to understand what is really happening, share your experience in the comments. Your perspective can illuminate part of this journey, and there is something powerful in recognizing how many others have felt the same shift as awareness begins to unfold. As your strategic distance sharpens your vision, you begin to understand that navigating this hostile field requires more than awareness. It requires adaptability. Life responds differently to those who see too much, and the world often tests anyone who dares to step outside its default patterns. What once felt overwhelming now becomes a kind of training ground, revealing how each moment of pressure exposes either a fracture or a hidden strength within you. The chaos that once destabilized you no longer carries the same power. Instead, it forces you to develop a quieter, deeper resilience that grows beneath the surface of your identity. You begin to notice that mental strength is not built through dramatic victories, but through small internal choices that accumulate over time. Choosing clarity over impulse, choosing silence over reactive speech, choosing direction, instead of drifting with circumstances. These choices, subtle as they are, begin shaping a different version of you, one that can withstand the tension of uncertain environments without collapsing into old habits. The hostile field does not become kinder, but you become less affected by its volatility. Your mind learns to operate with dual awareness, reading the external world with precision while simultaneously monitoring your internal state. You sense when a situation is pulling you off center, when someone's emotional weight tries to anchor itself to you, when an environment disrupts your rhythm, and instead of absorbing these forces unconsciously, you adjust your stance, reposition your attention, or disengage entirely. What used to drain you now reveals its structure, and what used to confuse you now appears almost predictable. This awareness does not remove the difficulties of life, but it changes the way you move through them. You begin to realize that the hostility of the field is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is the pressure that carves out your strength. The moments that once overwhelmed you now become indicators of where your next evolution will emerge, showing you which parts of yourself are ready to expand and which parts are still clinging to outdated fears. In this way, the chaos becomes less of a threat and more of a silent guide, shaping you into someone capable of thriving even where others struggle simply to remain standing. As your internal resilience strengthens, you begin to recognize the subtle influence of people, environments, and systems that actively shape your trajectory. Every space, every social circle, every professional network carries its own hidden agenda, often disguised as routine, friendliness, or opportunity. These influences are not always malicious. Many operate unconsciously, yet their effect on your energy, attention, and decision-making is profound. Awareness alone is not enough. You must learn to read these structures and navigate them without being consumed. You notice how certain individuals drain your focus with endless demands, how some environments amplify anxiety rather than clarity, how organizational systems reward conformity over insight. These realizations can feel isolating at first because the patterns are often invisible to the majority, and your responses may appear unnecessary or overly cautious to others. But what you are developing is discernment, the ability to recognize which influences enhance your growth and which subtly hinder it, even when they appear benign or socially acceptable. This discernment extends to psychological traps. You begin to see the expectations and unspoken pressures that manipulate behavior. Social norms, professional hierarchies, and cultural assumptions all attempt to align your thoughts and actions with patterns that are not inherently aligned with your evolving awareness. The challenge lies in maintaining clarity while existing within these systems, learning when to engage, when to resist, and when to simply observe. In this field, indifference is not ignorance. It is a conscious allocation of energy, a decision to preserve your focus for the elements that truly matter. The more skilled you become at navigating these subtle currents, the more your internal strategy matures. You learn to filter interactions, shield your attention, and act with precision rather than reaction. The hostile field, once a chaotic storm that could sweep you off balance, now becomes a living map. Its obstacles are guides, its pressure points are lessons, and its hidden structures are signals that help you refine your strategy. Every movement through this space builds mental fortitude and reinforces your ability to thrive without being entangled in the unconscious behaviors of those around you. By understanding who and what shapes your experience, you begin to act not out of fear or impulse, but with intentionality. You conserve your energy, anticipate challenges before they arise, and gradually turn what once felt like a battlefield into a space where your perception, awareness, and strategy allow you to move with control, poise, and calculated influence. As your awareness grows sharper, another unsettling truth begins to reveal itself. People do not respond to your awakening with neutrality. The more conscious you become, the more the world around you shifts in tone. Some individuals grow uncomfortable in your presence, sensing without understanding that you are no longer participating in the unspoken agreements that once governed your interactions. Others may attempt to pull you back into old dynamics, not out of malice, but because your clarity disrupts the emotional equilibrium they rely on. The masks people wear become more visible, and the roles they perform begin to feel strangely hollow. You start noticing how certain behaviors are triggered not by who you are, but by the version of you that existed before your perception evolved. People expect you to respond according to the script they wrote for you long ago, and when you do not, they experience confusion, resistance, or even subtle hostility. Awakening does not just change how you see the world, it changes how the world sees you. Your silence may be interpreted as distance, your honesty as confrontation, your boundaries as rebellion. To those still asleep within their psychological patterns, your transformation becomes a mirror they are not prepared to look into. This reaction can be disorienting at first. You may wonder whether you're doing something wrong, whether your growth is creating unnecessary friction. But soon you understand that this tension is not a sign of misalignment within you. It is a natural consequence of stepping outside the collective narrative. The field reacts to new awareness the same way it reacts to any disruption, with pressure. Yet this pressure is simply part of the transition from one level of perception to another, a signal that you are moving beyond the invisible constraints that once shaped your identity. As you integrate this understanding, you begin responding differently. You stop taking reactions personally, recognizing that most people are not reacting to you, but to the shift in themselves that your presence evokes. This realization brings a quiet strength, allowing you to move through the world with a steadier mind and a more grounded sense of self. If you have ever witnessed someone reacting to your growth in ways that surprised you, share your experience in the comments. Your perspective can illuminate this part of the journey for others who are just beginning to see how awakening reshapes not only the inner world, but every relationship around it. As these relational shifts unfold, a quieter transformation begins taking place inside you, one that is not triggered by the reactions of others, but by the increasing clarity of your own inner landscape. There comes a moment in every awakening when you stop trying to manage the external world and begin redirecting your attention inward toward the patterns, impulses, and emotional echoes that once dictated your behavior without resistance. This is the point where you no longer move through life purely in response to what happens around you. Instead, you begin shaping your experience from within, guided by a deeper sense of alignment. You start to notice how quickly your mind once reacted to tension, how easily your emotions were pulled into the gravity of external circumstances. Now, there is a small but powerful pause between stimulus and response, a space where clarity can emerge before action is taken. This pause becomes your anchor. It is the difference between being swept away by the hostility of the field and navigating it with intention. The world may still be unpredictable, but your inner footing grows steadier, less influenced by noise, and more attuned to the subtle signals that once went unnoticed. With this internal shift comes a new form of sovereignty. You are no longer defined by old stories or outdated fears. The opinions of others lose their former weight, not because you have become indifferent, but because you now understand that your path is shaped by something far more enduring than external validation. You begin to trust your intuition with a seriousness that once felt foreign, recognizing that it has always been the quiet compass guiding you toward alignment, even when you didn't yet know how to interpret its signals. This phase of inner reorientation is not dramatic or loud. It unfolds in silence, through small choices that gradually reshape the way you move through the world. You stop explaining yourself where explanation is unnecessary. You stop investing energy where it is not honored. You stop shrinking to fit expectations that were never meant for the person you are becoming. And with each of these subtle refusals, you reclaim another part of yourself that the world had gently taken over time. What emerges is a sense of direction that does not rely on external markers. You navigate the field not by force, but by presence, by a growing inner stability that allows you to move through uncertainty with a clarity that feels almost effortless. And as this inner shift deepens, a new understanding begins to form, one that will shape the next step of your evolution. As your inner stability grows, you naturally begin shaping a mental strategy that allows you to move through the hostile field with a different kind of intelligence. This strategy is not built on rigid rules or strict discipline. It emerges from an ongoing dialogue between awareness and experience. You start observing how the mind responds under pressure, how it tightens when confronted with conflict, how it opens when aligned with clarity. These observations become the foundation of a psychological framework that guides your choices with increasing precision. You notice that the external world often tries to dictate your pace, pushing you into urgency, distraction, or emotional reactivity. Yet the more conscious you become, the more you resist this external tempo and begin setting your own rhythm. You learn to step back before acting, to analyze the structure of a situation rather than its surface, to interpret behavior through patterns rather than isolated events. This shift in perception gives you an advantage that most people never realize exists, the ability to anticipate rather than merely react. Your mind also becomes more selective. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every feeling requires expression. Not every opportunity aligns with your direction. With this discernment, your internal world becomes quieter, cleaner, more focused. You lose interest in the noise that once consumed you because you can now see through its purpose. You recognize how much of the world depends on keeping people unaware, overstimulated, or emotionally entangled. But awareness breaks these mechanisms, leaving you free to navigate with intention rather than habit. This strategic clarity extends to your relationships as well. You observe how certain people are drawn to your steadiness, while others are unsettled by it. You understand that genuine alignment does not require persuasion. It reveals itself in silence. You begin investing only in the connections that support your growth, moving away from those that rely on unconscious patterns or emotional dependency. In doing so, your environment subtly reshapes itself around your new level of consciousness. What emerges from all this is not a rigid plan, but a fluid intelligence that adapts to the challenges of the field as they arise. You move through life with a heightened sensitivity to patterns, a deeper trust in your intuition, and a growing understanding that the world is shaped not by the loudest forces, but by the most aware minds. And as this awareness strengthens, something inside you begins preparing for the next stage, the moment when all these fragments of growth converge into a final shift that redefines how you exist in this field entirely. As all these layers of awareness begin to merge, something subtle but powerful settles within you. You no longer move through the hostile field as someone trying to survive its unpredictability. Instead, you navigate it with the quiet confidence of someone who understands its patterns, its illusions, and its hidden opportunities. The external world may still display the same chaos, the same distractions, the same emotional turbulence, but your relationship with it has transformed. You are no longer shaped by its hostility. You are shaped by your clarity. And clarity, once awakened, becomes a force that guides you from within. This shift is not loud or dramatic. It happens in the way you make decisions without hesitation, the way you protect your energy without guilt, the way you choose presence over impulse. You begin sensing paths that were invisible before, routes that align not with expectation, but with truth. The world continues to test you, but these tests no longer feel like threats. They feel like confirmations that you have stepped into a different level of perception, one where your mind, intuition, and awareness finally move in the same direction. And as this internal coherence strengthens, life itself begins to respond differently. You attract clarity because you embody clarity. You repel chaos because you no longer resonate with it. You find yourself surrounded by environments that match your awakened state, not because the world changed, but because you stopped surrendering your direction to forces that never deserved to shape you. This is the quiet power of awakening, not escaping the hostile field, but learning to thrive inside it without losing yourself. If you reached this point of the journey, let me know in the comments by writing the phrase "This message was for me." It is always meaningful to see who walks with these insights until the end, and if the content here brought clarity or strength to your path, consider subscribing so you can continue exploring these deeper layers of awareness with me. Leaving a like also helps this message reach more people who may need it, strengthening the same field of consciousness you are building within yourself. There is another video here that expands on this inner transformation and connects naturally with everything we explored. If you feel aligned, click and continue this path with me, letting the next step unfold with the same clarity that brought you this far.